you got to watch out. Got to watch out for the the angry Mormons. And then it shows like this guy like holding like a Bible, and he's like, the wrath of God will fall upon them. And it's coming from like, kind of a low angle. And he's like, there's like fire light on his, flickering on his face. And it's just like, oh my goodness.
As the cold winds of winter sweep in, there's nothing like the warmth of a comforting cup to help you slow down and unwind. This is the season. Let postum be your cozy companion. Made from roasted grains, postum is caffeine-free and rich with a smooth roasted flavor. It's the perfect drink for those quiet, chilly mornings. Whether you're curled up with a good book, sharing a laugh with loved ones, or simply watching the snow fall outside, a cup of postum is the moment you have been waiting for.
Jeff, take it away.
All right. Welcome to This Week in Mormons.
Hey, guys.
Jeff.
And Kurt. Sorry, I totally interrupted your intro, but
cool.
So welcome back, Jeff. I'm glad you're leading up this co-host. You're the host of the podcast this week. I'm just the co-host.
Okay, that's
I'm your wingman.
All right,
making it happen. So but I'm going to ask you questions, of course, because that's what I do. But how has it been so far? You've done a couple episodes, and you feel like you're firmly in the TWIM anchor chair.
I hope so. I think the last 2 episodes were pretty interesting. I enjoyed doing it. JJ, he's just got a lot going on. He just moved out to Virginia, and I think he's just kind of like getting settled out there. So
we might have some other people come through then, right?
Yeah.
I find that perfect match, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
nice.
For my perfect match.
Yeah. Speaking of that, you're a single Latter-day Saint.
I know, as you say, in more ways than one. So,
well, tell me about that. How would you? Because how old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
I am 36.
And how would you summarize your single adult journey in the church? Because never been married, is that right?
Never been married.
All right.
Nope.
So how's it been?
It's kind of funny. I feel like my dating journey got a lot better in my 30s. Yeah. I moved to DC, Washington, DC, and right after college. And DC is kind of notorious for being tough on dating. I don't know if I feel like most people I talk to, they agree with me about that. And I kind of refer to like my 20s as like the drought, of dating, because it was a long time of not a lot of success. And a lot of people do meet their spouses in DC and everything. But I think just after I moved out west and there's just a larger pool of people, it just makes it a lot easier. And then also, to be honest, like online dating has actually been pretty good for me.
Oh, really? Wow.
A lot of people kind of say that online dating is like, they talk about it like they talk about AI or something. There's nothing good. Everybody's scared of it.
Well, Jeff, you're a good looking guy. That's probably why people don't hesitate to swipe on you, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just feel like in the ward setting, dating in the ward setting has never like set well with me. Like, it's always just kind of awkward. You go on a date with a girl and then you have to like see her at church, like on Sunday,
whether it went well or not.
Yeah. And then, you're dating, everybody knows everybody. And honestly, I even kind of like, I had a couple friends that sort of like fell out because we tried the dating thing and it didn't work out. And so, I kind of like the anonymity of the online dating stuff. So
awesome. So is there any special girl in your life right now?
No, unfortunately, no. I'm back at square one right now.
If there was, I mean, you would love to talk about that on This Week in Mormons.
Why not?
She would love to hear that. But anyways.
Yeah, but I will say I just moved over to a family ward
Oh, all
uh,
right.
recently,
Has it
and
been good so far?
yeah,
I
yeah. I
mean,
mean,
nobody talks to you, and you're forbidden to sit except on
for
the back
about
row, right?
the first like 4 or 5 months, that was what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually had to. I mean, I think they were already thinking of me for a calling, but I actually had to reach out to my bishop and say like, "Hey, like, I'm
If you haven't
here.
noticed, I'm here. Yeah.
I know I'm like a single guy, but like I actually want to be involved in the ward and everything." And then I think they were just, I don't know, who
Yeah.
knows,
Yeah.
what
So
people have.
have they asked you to speak in church?
They did, yeah, they
Okay.
did ask me to
All
speak
right.
in church. So no, they've done a good job. It took a little while, but they've done a good job. So I just got called to the elders quorum. They made up a calling for me, which
Oh
is
boy.
I'm used to, and because you do that a lot in singles wards.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say, just like going, I feel like I'm coming back to the church almost.
Hmm.
That's how different singles wards are.
Like coming from singles ward, the single
Yeah,
ward scene to the traditional
yeah,
geographic ward
yeah.
scene.
That's how different they feel to me because you
Uh-huh.
just I think it's because it reminds me of the ward that I grew up in.
Mm,
And I had been outside of the family wards for like 15 years, and
yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I was in a singles ward almost as long as I was in a family ward. You know,
Wow. Yeah. So
and
does
I've
it feel
always
good to be back then? Is it like a good thing
Yeah,
or?
I've always been to be honest, I've always been a proponent of just getting rid of singles wards for the most
Ooh,
part.
I'm
Um,
right there with you.
and I kind of feel like, yeah, I've always felt a little hypocritical, because I'm like, I know that, you know, I have opinions on this, but I'm still, there's always different reasons, I guess, for
Yeah.
continuing singles wards. But now that I've kind of settled down here in Utah and I recently bought a house, I just felt like, okay, now it's time to move over.
Yeah. So the Twim audience wants to know, what is it you do for work?
So I'm a video producer,
Love
um,
it.
and a podcast producer as well. Although I
Nice.
don't do as many podcasts as
You
I did over the pandemic, but
Oh yeah. But you're not typically on this side of the microphone, right?
no, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Nice.
I've always been curious about what it's like,
Yeah.
And actually, in college, I was in theater, and so I'm used to like being in front of people, but
Yeah. Nice. And so
usually
what
I
type
have
of
somebody, giving me lines to say. It's a little different coming up with it on the spot.
videos are you producing?
So I do documentary content and corporate content.
Mhm.
So I work for businesses, but mostly nonprofits. Um, I have a like a retainer that keeps me really busy with an organization in um, Washington D.C. called the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, and
Mhm.
they do First Amendment litigation, religious liberty litigation. And basically, I make videos. They're kind of like Vox style videos,
Mhm.
like YouTube explainer videos.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
so I kind of have like a little bit of a journalism background, and then I sort of came into the industry when like YouTube was getting big. So I do a lot of like online content, and then I've lived in Los Angeles for a couple years, and I worked in the film industry sort of just a little bit there, and but now I just have my own little company of one, and just do videos and
Yeah.
documentary style videos for people. So
And talk about Mormon news in your spare time, right?
yeah,
So is there any place if people want to see some of your work? I mean, anything you're proud of that's out there or?
yeah. I would say probably the most recent thing that I'm like most proud of. I do a lot of videos, but it's hard to land on a project that you're like super excited about that is going to resonate with people.
Mhm.
But one of the videos that I did for this organization in DC that I think is like has pretty broad appeal is a video about an Apache sacred land in Arizona that's
Mm.
being mined for copper, and they're sort of bringing this case before. They're actually petitioning the case to the Supreme Court right now, And I won't get into the details about it, but it's a pretty interesting case. I got to fly to Arizona and interview these this Apache tribe out there and sort of like document one of their ceremonies that happens on this land. And that I think if you just like Google Beckett Fund Apache Sacred Land on
Mhm.
YouTube, you'll find it. It's
Oh,
about
okay.
it's about 9 minutes, and like I said, it's like a kind of a YouTube explainer
Yeah.
type video.
So you
So
did everything on that from like shooting the actual footage to editing and was it
I would say actually on that one, I directed it. I hired a
okay?
cinematographer to help me with that. We had probably about just a small crew of 3 people
Wow.
go out there, and then so I directed it, produced it, and edited it,
Yeah.
and then I actually hired an animator from Los Angeles to animate some of the because they didn't want us filming some of their ceremonies.
Yeah,
We
sure.
actually went out there with our cameras,
Yeah.
and they're like, the medicine man told me that we couldn't film. And and so we had to turn off the cameras and be very, very sensitive. We were able to film some other stuff in the area, but so we ended up actually animating this they call it a sunrise ceremony for women who are coming of age, that they've been performing on this land for like, you know, thousands or hundreds of years or whatever. Um and so I was able to sort of animate what that looks like.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
yeah, it's
What
pretty.
you should have done is called Hulu and asked them to reenact sacred religious ceremonies because they're really good at that. And so you can, I joke, but really Hulu, I want to punch you in the stomach. Um, so that's cool. It's good to know a little bit more about you. And and so you're sort of our special religious liberty correspondent. I mean, I'm sure you've gotten some unique perspectives and opinions just being in that space for so many years, right? About religious liberty.
Yeah, I have an opinion. Definitely have an opinion.
Man, we may need to do our own, just a separate episode about Jeff's rants
Yeah,
on
I have
religious
like
liberty.
a legal opinion from somebody who's been working with attorneys for like
Yeah.
a decade, you
Okay,
know.
so let me give you a hypothetical. Say, obviously the church is concerned about religious liberty, and they've been doing a lot of things around that. So let's say you walk into an elevator with a guy who works for the church in PR or like is in charge of religious liberty. Like, what advice would you give to the church as far as what they're doing or not doing that would help their case, or maybe they need to slow down on it? I mean, what comes to mind?
Well, you know, every case is different, and I think the church is generally pretty good about religious liberty stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they're extremely obviously their legal department and everything. They're like really super on top of it.
Hmm.
Um, I think the only thing that comes to mind that I've thought about recently is what we already talked about on the podcast, which is the temples
Hmm.
that they're building right now, and they're running into some like it seems like they're running into some religious liberty issues there, where it's like they're basically saying, "Hey, we can do whatever we want with these temples. Um, we can construct what we want because
Yeah.
we have the law behind us."
Yeah. They're
The
playing those cards, right?
Yeah, it's called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act,
Hmm.
and it basically protects, um, yeah, faith-based organizations who want to build worship buildings, and the reason that you need protection in that area is because there's often discrimination that happens in those circumstances. And it's not just from like animus, but it's also like churches, sometimes they don't really contribute a lot to like the bottom line of a community. And so sometimes they just face difficulties with like zoning issues and stuff, or for example, there was one case in California where this Christian church was serving homeless people, and it brought a lot of homeless people to their neighborhood, and all of the neighbors started complaining.
Hmm.
And so and they were trying to get them to stop doing that, basically. So there's
Hmm.
just like there's all kinds of issues that happen, but I think it's very important in these cases to just try, in all religious liberty cases, don't go straight to the courts. You should really try and resolve things
Yeah.
outside of the courts and be clear about what your beliefs are, what you require, but also be very respectful of the people. And I feel like in these temple in that temple in Texas, just from what I've read about it, it's like, we don't need a 300-foot steeple,
Mhm.
like if the people don't want that there, then let's work with them there and start building our good relationships now. If you run to the religious liberty thing like right away, people are going to start not liking religious liberty,
Yeah.
and so you can't use it as like uh you can't use it to get your way, I guess, all the time. It's kind
Right.
of like a last resort thing. So
Interesting. All right. Good. Very good. Anything else we need to know about Jeff?
no, I think we should get to the news.
We should get to the news. All right. So this BYU story has been in the news as far as Well, okay. What I want to say is that this BYU non-story that the Salt Lake Tribune made a story has been in the news. Um, to me, this is the most tame. I don't know. I just feel like this is silly. And I get it. People are like, no, but it's got to be fair. And there's these poor professors, is there some sort type of victim class? No, I feel like the Salt Lake Tribune like needed something to write about. They made a spooky video about it, and now it's become this thing. Now, if I'll reference our fellow This Week in Mormons host, Matt, he has a separate podcast called Real Mormonism, and he talked about this is from a professor standpoint. And do you have any initial thoughts on this before
No,
I
no,
get
keep
on my
on going.
soapbox?
Keep
Okay,
on going. Yeah.
so here's my thing. Here's the things people aren't talking about. Okay, one, I don't know. Have you ever worked for corporate America, Jeff?
No, I have
Okay,
not.
well, good for you. Let's see if
Yeah.
we can
I'm
keep
kind of
that.
like, goodness.
Most people who work for corporate America, especially those who've maybe gone through a round of layoffs, they know that the company doesn't care about you, right? Like they're not going to be transparent. They're not going to tell you why they came to this decision or why they are letting you go or why they're restructuring the organization. They're just doing it, right? And so every organization has that ability, right? The second thing that doesn't mean talking about is that the academics who are sort of up in arms about this topic, my message to them is like, let me tell you what. Your blockbuster video in 1997. Like this is a dying industry. That as far as academia, there's a lot of money there, and it's probably that which will make sure it's around for a while. But more and more, less and less people are going to universities and academia, and they're not seeing the value that they get out of it by getting some psychology degree or whatever, and so they're just going right into the workforce. They're finding there's so many unique like upstarts, and to see the things that the church is doing, especially through the direction of Elder Gilbert, is like earth shattering, cool stuff with Pathway and the way they're reaching international uh, places with education. Like that's the new model, and so when I think of Elder Gilbert sitting in his office about standards with BYU professors, I just don't think it's that big of a I don't know, like a emphasis in his life that he's really losing sleep over it, because he is making leaps and bounds to these other efforts that the church is doing, and I just think that's the new direction. And the other thing that, and Matt alluded to this, as far as like this will make BYU a weaker institution. When I say, well, every institution is becoming weaker, and if we need to regroup, it's sort of going through, I call it like the Kirtland period. I think like Brigham Young said, quoting Joseph Smith, that at one point only 12 people in Kirtland believed that Joseph Smith was a prophet. But there was like strength that came out of that shrinking and then growing. So I don't
Mm.
know. I just feel like, will it hurt the perspective of BYU? Yeah, maybe, but I don't think they're necessarily worried about that because they're making so many leaps and bounds of educating the church more broadly, and not just the church. I mean, members and non-members alike throughout the world, making a better place there. And so, anyways, with that said, Deseret News is sort of returning fire with the Salt Lake Tribune and publishing several articles. One being about so Shima Bogman, who says, "I was happy to teaching for BYU for 10 years at the I was happy teaching for 10 years at the University of Utah Law School, but I recently rejoined the faculty at BYU Law. At the time I went to the University of Utah, I was told that I was the first and only person to leave a professorship at BYU Law to head up north, and to my knowledge, I am the only person to have made the move back down south." And she goes on, basically the articles articulating just the not only the the freedom she feels at BYU, but feeling like that she has this world that she can play in, this sandbox, if you will, where she can talk about secular law, principles and concepts at the same time of putting it up against her religion and exploring that way. But anyways, I've gone on long enough. Put me in my place, Jeff? I'm crazy, right?
Well, first of all, I don't want to make you talk a bunch more about this because I know I need to give my opinion. But what about what is Matt's what is Matt's take on this? I didn't hear his take.
Well, I think what I understand, and I'll let Matt speak for himself when he's on the podcast. I think he's next week. So, but he was concerned that that this is going to hurt the institution and the brand of
I
BYU,
see.
which I would say, yeah, probably,
Oh, okay,
and I'm
okay.
okay with that, right? Like as far as like in the world we live in, like um, I think there's just a moment of regrouping, and going back to Elder Holland's speech, that I think feel so many people misnomer it as the musket talk, which is just unfair, in my opinion, to call it that. But he was very clear about we will be an institution that stands for certain things, and if that means that we lose certifications or accreditation or whatever, like so be it, type of thing. Obviously, I'm
I kind of feel like right now, at least the moment that we're in right now, these types of like stories and concerns are we're kind of moving past them a little bit.
Mhm.
You know, I think that the university's like tactic of sort of just sticking to its guns, um, no pun intended, with regards to the musket
musket talk,
fire.
yeah.
um, um, I think that they're probably right to do that in the sense of like the right public relations move,
Mhm.
because I think that this will probably they'll probably just move past this. Um, I didn't have a chance to read the original Salt Lake Tribune article. I actually tried, but there was a paywall, and
Yeah.
so um,
Speaking of institutions that are shrinking and dying, but
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Um, so I will say again with the religious liberty angle, um, this also happens a lot in the religious liberty world, where
Mm,
you have religious faith based schools who have an identity. They have a faith based identity. Part of the purpose of starting their school is to pass on and teach their beliefs, or to educate people within the context of their beliefs.
mhm,
And their professors are a very important medium for those beliefs. Where you start to run into complications is when a school gets bigger and bigger and starts to almost take on the facade of a secular organization, right? Like BYU. I mean, I didn't go to BYU. I have no idea how like religious they are. And the thing is like what I'm talking about is like in the practical everyday sense, do they pray before they start? Some professors do, I imagine, right?
yeah, I
Then
think most of them, yeah.
there are a lot of religious institutions out there, educational institutions, who don't incorporate their beliefs very much into their teachings. It's like, oh yeah, we were founded by like a group of like Christian people 100 years ago, and we like barely talk about it now, but like it's
Mhm,
still like in our mission statement, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
So everybody like brings their beliefs like differently to their schools. And I think it's important that religious organizations can continue to embody their beliefs in their staff, and in um because if we tell them they can't do that, then they're going to go away,
right,
right? And the fact of the matter is that religious organizations contribute a lot in the educational sphere, so we should allow them to I think do what they want to do.
yeah,
That's all. Those are the high principles without me looking at the details of this.
right,
But
yeah,
I can see where they're coming from. But again, also I do think that religious organizations need to try and be as compromising as possible, and really like investigate like or examine, why are we doing this? Are we just like digging in our heels because this is the way things have always been done? So they also need to like come to the table too.
Yep.
But
Yep.
anyway,
No, I agree. I agree.
that's my 2 cents.
And I'll give everybody whiplash here because there are, and I realize this, the original article and these follow-up articles, there's so many dynamics, and it's somewhat like politics where I'll run to our issue that's like really like that our base loves to hear, and we just sort of pound that, like it's wonderful working at BYU and I can be faithful and we pray at the beginning of class and all these things, right? But there's a lot to it, and so I would love for people to comment or go to contact at This Week in Mormons, and you can continue and share your opinion that we'll respond to. But there is a dynamic here that I think really needs to be looked at, which a lot in the article and others have addressed, which is this dynamic of ecclesiastical endorsement. So I've been that bishop who has actually sat and done a lot of these ecclesiastical endorsements, not just for students, but also for employees of the church. And I remember this one instance where a guy came in and he was working for the church. I forget exactly what he did, and he had not been paying tithing. And so I asked him the question. He could not say was a full tithe payer. It's not like, there was no loophole for me to jump in. I was like, you're not paying tithing. I don't know how else to respond to this other than not give you an ecclesiastical endorsement. Well, he then went to a few days later, I got a call from another bishop who this guy went to trying to like circumvent the system and go to another bishop and anyways, it was kind of a mess. But, and I was like torn up inside. Like, this is the guy's livelihood, right? Like, this is his job. And here he is having to have these tough conversations with religious leaders. There's another situation that I'll keep very plain because it's a sensitive situation. But at one point, I had a friend who was a professor at a church institution, and he had a struggle with pornography. And obviously, he was looking for help and overcoming this, and he went to his bishop and did all the things. But then it comes to his ecclesiastical endorsement, where here he is, like trying to navigate this, save his marriage, and
Yeah.
he sincerely wanted to overcome it, but it was something he really struggled with. And, the words "stop it" didn't just seem to magically fix it. Right. So here he is struggling with this and sort of getting in these probation states with the school, saying you kind of have 6 months or you're going to have to move on. And so it's just like, I feel like, yeah, this ecclesiastical endorsement system could be better looked at, where to me, Elder Gilbert or the administration of BYU, they can ask any question they want to their professors, because generally, obviously they have further protections as a religious institution, but even in corporate America, there were certain standards that they set, and if I wasn't going to live up to those things, I could move on, right? But to me, it's like, ask those questions in the context of the job, not your religion, right? Because it just sort of snowballs that not only are you losing your temple recommend, maybe losing your marriage, you're losing your job, like all these things are on the line, and so it really isn't fair to the individual. And I feel like it's such a administrative process when it's really a human process, right? So I'm willing to go with people there of just saying, like, yeah, that part could be looked at to a place that it really puts professors or others in a tough spot where they're saying, like, am I going to have to just lie because I need this job? Or like, I don't know where else to want to go, or I don't want to move and go teach at, some community college in Northern Idaho or whatever it is. Right. And so it's tough. It's tough. So, but I do think there's a lot of fuss about nothing here, but
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you about the ecclesiastical endorsement. I had a friend horror story where, yeah, he was going to school at BYU Idaho. He had just moved everything out there, and he confessed to the bishop about some things that he had done like
Mhm.
a year before or something, and he was just trying to put himself right, with God and stuff. And they sent him home, and he
Mm.
had to like figure out, I mean, just like the process of like deciding what school you're going to go to. And it's just a lot to put on like a 21-year-old kid, and
Yeah.
so I just, yeah, I agree with you
Yeah.
there. That's a
And
tough.
and again, each situation is different, like you mentioned. And to me, it's like with somebody struggling with pornography, when it comes to their job, like if there's like he's going to therapy, he's going to groups, he's going to, like, there's a clear indication that he's trying to overcome this. Like, to me, it's like, great, man, as long as you need, like, we're here for you. Right. Now,
Yeah.
if it's a professor who's like, I believe in gay marriage, and I'm going to preach it from my classroom, and that's just the way it is. Like, okay, like bless your heart, but there's probably not a place for you here, right? Like, and
Yeah,
there's, you know,
I think that there's something to be said for like the repentant. Are you
yeah, in
in
a repentant mode, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Maybe you're not like succeeding at it, but that's kind of what repentance is like we're always trying to get better, you
Yeah.
know? So,
Yeah, and for even a professor to say, "Listen, I really do believe in gay marriage, and I think it should be done in temples, and but this is something I wrestle with, and but I understand the boundaries that you're placing, and when I teach physics, I'm just going to teach physics, and we're going to pray, and I'll honor prophets, seers, and revelators, and the Book of Mormon, the Scripture, because I believe in those things. But just so you know, I wrestle here. Like, great, if you ever want to talk about it, let's talk
there is
about it,
a
right?
distinction there for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Do you want to take us? Should
Well,
we head to LA with updates on fires and the church's involvement there?
yeah. So, as I'm sure everybody knows, the Los Angeles area has been struggling over the last week or so with um, really serious fires, and I feel like off basically every year, there's some sort of like wildfire that's happening in that area, but this one is kind of like that sort of almost doomsday scenario
Yeah.
that everybody was sort of like not talking about,
Yeah.
hoping wouldn't happen. And then it did happen. And now they're just, I mean, it's just the destruction is like surreal looking at this one community in Los Angeles, Pacific Palisades. Pacific Palisades, if I'm remembering correctly, is kind of like a little northwest of the valley. Um, I actually lived in LA for 2 years. I lived in the neighborhood of Sherman Oaks, and I would go to the beach in Malibu. It's a beautiful, beautiful beach. It feels like you're in Europe almost. The way that the houses are stacked up on the mountains, and the ocean is right there at the base of the mountains. So it's just really sad to hear about these fires that are raging through. But there are some updates. LDS Daily seemed to have a pretty good like ongoing blog update
Yeah.
on the LA fires. Um, According to their last update that I think on Wednesday, 48 members of the church have lost their homes, and 750 are still evacuated. Um, and let's see here. And then also people might be asking, well, what about the LA Temple? And actually, when I lived there, I lived right across the street from the LA Temple,
Oh, cool.
Westwood. It was really cool. I could look out my window and see the Angel Moroni.
So this is good because I wanted to ask somebody about this because I've heard so many people, as we do, that we're humans and we do this. Sometimes we want to create like the miracle out of the story, right? And I'm sure there's miracles, and they'll be like volumes filled with miracles and God showing up. And I fully believe in miracles, but sometimes we're like, isn't it great? I've heard many people like that Los Angeles temple has been spared from the fire, right? But I'm thinking, well, like, I mean, I would imagine a temple's in a place where one, there's a lot of open space. It's not like the temple's surrounded with a tight, trees. Like maybe the Portland temple that's like in the middle of the woods there'd be a problem there. But it kind of feels like, guys, I
Yeah.
don't think the temple was ever at risk, even if it was in the neighborhood. But I mean, you've lived there, so is that the case, or what do you think?
I don't really know exactly how these like fires spread,
Yeah,
but that is a good point that it is fairly isolated. I mean, there are apartment buildings right across the street from the temple, but the
yeah,
temple is still probably about 50 yards or so away from like the nearest structure, I
right.
guess.
I
And
mean, there's
it's
a soccer field behind it. I'm looking on Google Maps here. Is that
yeah,
right? Like
yeah, I think
at a
so. And
school?
yeah,
Okay.
and there's I think that the mission president's residence is close by, kind of like
Mm.
in that parking lot. And then obviously they have the gardens and stuff
Yeah,
there too, surrounding it. And then on one side of it, they have just this huge highway, right?
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
kind of like looking down. So you're right. There, it is kind of like isolated. But the thing is, the fire really isn't in that area.
Right.
It
I think
has
there were some pictures where you could kind of see it from the distance. I think some people said it was within. 100 miles or something. I don't know, but
Yeah. You could, I mean, because how big these fires are, if you just put like a long lens on your camera, you
yeah,
can
you can
make
say,
it the way that the distortion works. You can make it look like the fires are like right behind it.
yeah.
Um,
But I mean, the temple's been remained open other than one day. I think they
yeah,
shut it down, and so it's been fully functioning, and which is great. A place that
people
people can
can
go
find
pray,
self.
and I mean, let's keep that temple open and going if we
Absolutely.
can, so everybody's safe. So interesting.
Yeah.
Any other
Um,
highlights there?
I would say they are opening up meeting houses of the church for community staging and shelter. I remember they did the same thing. This is forever ago. There was Hurricane Sandy out in New York? Was that what
Mm,
it was called? There was a
yeah,
big
I think so.
hurricane out there, and they did the same thing where they basically put cots out in the church and stuff and let people stay there. So that's very good. Again, another really great thing about having these sort of church buildings everywhere is
Yeah.
you can sort of turn to those in need.
And there hasn't been any report that we've lost a church building to the fire, right?
Yeah, I think that there were some rumors, but according to according to one of these articles, it said that the Palisades. I think it was the statement from the Los Angeles stake president. He said, "In what can only be described as miraculous, the Pacific Palisades Chapel has survived unscathed despite fires burning all around the
Oh,
property."
wow. Okay.
So that might be
There we
too.
go. There's our miracle, folks.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
your miracle.
And even that, like, I sort of wince of like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is a miracle, but let's not say it out loud because there's probably people who like lost
Because
their
then if it burns
family, their
down,
dog,
you're
and
like,
maybe
well,
yeah.
what are we gonna
Yeah.
say
So,
now?
yeah.
So, but he says we see this as a beacon of hope for the future recovery and renewal of the Pacific Palisades community in the years ahead. So, we are working to provide access to our chapels to our interfaith congregations who have lost their places of worship. So, anyway,
Yeah. Awesome. I think
there's
some good stories will continue to come out of that. I think Elder Bednar, you know, tweeted or posted something just about his prayers and how the church has, been activated and all the resources they have. So hopefully from this point forward, you get nothing but good news and the death
yeah,
toll stops rising and those things. So of course we
yeah,
pray for them.
definitely
So
continue to pray for them, and also if you can find any ways to contribute. Definitely do that. Maybe pull the resources of the ward to send help their way. I think it's really needed right now.
yep. Love it. All right, Jeff, how do you feel about violent Westerns?
Honestly, usually I love them.
Violent Westerns that disparage your faith. How about that?
Yeah.
Is that where you want to go next, or do you want? Is
I mean,
there?
it makes sense. There is this, yeah, there we're talking about American, how do you even say that? Is
I
it
think it's American Primeval.
primeval? Okay. I want to say primeval.
Primeval. I mean, that's how they say it in France, but
Um yeah, so yeah, American Primeval, I think we talked about it in some episodes past. I don't think anybody's actually watched the whole thing yet among our hosts. And I tried. I didn't actually find out about it until this week. So I was like, okay, I got to watch this for
yeah,
Twin. Basically, the hook is the Utah War. And this is really the first depiction of the Mountain Meadows Massacre um, in mainstream media, I would
yeah,
say, except for, I guess, like some books that have been written about
yeah.
it.
And I think there was a John Voight movie around the time Romney was running that they
Oh,
tried
really?
to. Yeah, John Voight played Brigham Young, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
it really, I think it flopped at the theaters, and but I think they were. I think it was during the primaries where
Oh, my
who was
gosh.
it? Huckabee was really coming after Romney's faith or whatever. So there's this,
Yeah.
talking, sort of blaming the Mountain Meadows massacre on Brigham Young, which has been debunked over and over again that
Right.
he was actively trying to discourage them from taking any action. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and this is the thing, they're sort of leveraging this. I mean, talking about if you need a good Western, violent Western, like unfortunately, Mountain Meadows Massacre is a good foundation of a story. However, it's like, man, like don't the blowback just sort of with on Brigham Young and our faith and all these things. It's like, okay, that's not history. And I'll tell you what's her name? The the lady that is consults on with Hulu on all these Hanson Park. What's her name?
Oh, I don't know about this.
Anyways, yeah. So she's kind of a former member of the church, quite anti, in my opinion, and is always she's created quite a career out of being a historical consultant on these projects, right? And so she's the one that, like, when Hulu, did the whole temple ceremony, where the images look like they literally filmed this in the Salt Lake Temple, right? Because she was the consultant on that and helped them really understand like how this goes and things like
Uh,
that. So anyway, she was a consultant here, but I'm like, man, like I get like, sure, if you want to talk about it, it's part of history. We wish it never happened, and we would hope it would just go away. But unfortunately, it happened, and it was members of the church that were involved. But you know, I guess at this time it's like you keep sucker punching us with these with these different media, uh,
yeah.
series or whatever it is. Like one more, So
Yeah, it seems like there's this kind of like trope of
yeah,
like violent Mormonism that the media is really excited about. Or I guess I should say Hollywood. Like, yeah, it feels like any piece of media that comes out about LDS is based in some sort of violence. Unfortunately, like that's kind of, if you're gonna make a western and you want it to be like a western action epic, you need to
hmm
have some violence.
right, right,
So I get that, but I think the problem with this series is now listen, I've only watched the first episode, so I can't fully like. But I'll say in the first 5 minutes, I wanted to turn it off. They have this scene where it's like, you gotta watch out for the angry Mormons, and then it shows like this guy like holding like a Bible, and he's like, the wrath of God will fall upon them. And it's coming from like, kind of a low angle. And he's like, there's like fire light on his, flickering on his face. And it's just like, oh my
yeah,
goodness. So I think that just from watching the first episode, honestly, like the action is actually pretty good, but I think that it just feels very surface level and a little
hmm
cheesy. And that's my main reason for not really wanting to watch is I just don't really think it's very good. There's
yeah,
something very cliche. It
right,
feels very their interpretation of Brigham Young, and because I did watch like a scene with him, and then in the second episode, and then yeah, it just all feels very cliche. So
yeah. Well, and then I'm sure this is always it's always a different experience when it's about your people. I'm sure I've watched
right,
hundreds of other forms of content about a certain demographic or group or
yeah.
and I'm just sort of shrugging my shoulders like, I guess that's what they're like. Anyways, more popcorn. Like,
That's what's so scary about it is that is
right,
what people do when they see
right.
this. I mean, I'm even doing that in my head when I'm watching Brigham Young. I'm like, well, maybe Brigham Young was like that. I know he said things.
Uh-huh.
I know he said things that honestly, Brigham Young is kind of always kind of remind me a little bit of Trump, just the way that he talks and
Yeah,
like,
sure.
you know, how he says a lot of like really sort of bold, controversial things. And you're like, how do you really mean that?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and and watching this depiction of him, the problem is that we don't really actually know exactly what Brigham Young was
yeah,
like.
yeah.
And what they're doing is they are taking their sort of caricature of like violent sort of dumb Mormonism, and they're
Mhm.
applying it to that. And what we're doing is we're taking our picture of Brigham Young as a prophet and saying this doesn't fit with that,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to link to this. And again, this is all about both sides. I realize all these, resources and perspectives are biased, but I mean, they're made by humans, so you can't really get away from the bias. But uh, um, Dan, what's his name at Fair Latter Day Saint, Dan Peterson. There is a from their most recent conference. He did a whole hour about Brigham Young, about who he was as a person, as a prophet, and so I found it really insightful. And again, I know Fair is apologetic, but that doesn't mean you can't listen to it and you can't recognize their bias. But if you need, because Brigham Young's had a rough go the last little bit, and maybe he deserves it. I don't know, but we kind of find he's always under the bus when it comes to anything historical. And I think we're not giving him enough credit, the type of leader, the type of prophet he was, the type of man he was. And so it would do us well. And again, I'm not saying he's some even Joseph Smith figure. He wouldn't even put himself on that level, I don't think. But I think there's more we can learn about Brigham Young to really say, you know what, really complicated guy, but wow, look what he did, and he was a prophet of God. So
Yeah, we do tend to apply a lot our sort of modern lens of how a person should be or act or whatever to him
Mhm.
without. And again, that's what this TV show feels like. It's like they're not putting themselves in the context of the period. And they start the show with the Mountain Meadows massacre, right?
Yeah.
The first episode. And if I were to do it, I would put the Mountain Meadows
Yeah.
massacre at the end and explain the context, because I think that in this case, like, the truth is probably more entertaining, more fascinating than the fiction that
Mhm.
they've created. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if Netflix wanted an awesome series, I mean, do the whole Mountain Meadows massacre from what happened to the trial to the executions to all that, and man, it would be captivating, I think. So really good stuff. All right, should we move on to on the front lines of Trump's impending trade war, an unflappable Latter Day Saint article? This may be more in your arena. What do you think? This is how's it?
yeah,
Because there's a Latter Day Saint, James Greer, right, who's
yeah.
involved here.
hmm
What do you know about it?
Well, first of all, yeah, I had to look up this word unflappable. Did you know what unflappable
No,
meant?
I have no idea. I mean, I would guess it means like he
I think I have to look it up
he
again.
can't focused or non-discouraged. I don't know.
Yeah, define unflappable. And it makes you feel dumb because it looks like such an easy word to understand. Uh, Having or showing calmness in a crisis.
Okay, yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's
So that,
in the universe of it. Yeah,
um, yeah. So Jameson Greer, he's a trade lawyer, and he is Trump's nominee for U.S. Trade Representative, which is the this person leads key trade negotiations and policy implementations. And that's a really big deal because obviously Trump's trade policies are one of the sort of biggest talking points, one of the
Mhm.
biggest sort of policy issues that he's bringing to his presidency this time around. Um, yeah, he'll serve as Trump's chief advisor, and if he's confirmed, he'll serve as Trump's chief advisor and negotiator on international trade. And he was a lawyer in the first Trump administration. And if he gets confirmed for this position, he will be in one of the most high stakes positions in the upcoming administration. And he is the only member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints nominated by Trump to a cabinet level position in the administration. So if
Yeah,
he's confirmed, he will be the highest ranking uh, member of the church in the country. And he will have a very large influence on U.S. economy.
yeah.
So
There are many interesting conversations between him and Trump in the future, I'm sure, since Trump is so focused on, you know, on trade wars and those types of things. So he graduated from Brigham Young University. It's weird when I read about guys who, it says he served a 2-year mission in Brussels after graduating from high school in 1998. So it's like, wow, you're 2 years older than me, and you like got big boy jobs. I still feel like
yeah.
I'm a podcaster. What'd you do with your life? Um, let's see. And but yeah, this is, if confirmed as U.S. Trade Representative, Greer would be the first Latter Day Saint cabinet level official since Mike Leavitt, who served as a Secretary of Health and Human Services in 2009 with the. I guess did he? I know he was with Bush, but did maybe he, it says 2009? Maybe he carried over a few years with Obama, but because
Mm.
I don't know, or I guess officially Obama became president in 2009, right? That's when the inauguration would have been, right? I think 2008 is when he won the election. So yeah, there you have it. Very good. We got let's see, we got about 10 minutes left here, and let's do some
Mhm.
inspiring news. I like this. You
Yeah.
added some
Okay.
inspiring news to it. So thousands gather to package 1 million meals for Utah Food Bank. Youth of the church from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints gathered to assemble 1 million meals from the Utah Bank during a special youth night in Salt Lake City on January 14th. Silicon Slopes, an organization that represents Utah's business community, sponsored the service project. So I think Silicon Slopes, that's like they also do like a conference every year. So I think that's happening. So this is probably in conjunction with that as well. Anything else you learned about this?
I just I just included it because I thought, a million meals. That's
Yeah,
a
that's,
that's a lot.
yeah, I love it.
It said that 10,000 people would gather to assemble meals. So, I'm not putting this in here just because it's like something happening at Silicon Slopes. It's more just like, yeah, that's a big service project being put on by youth in the church, and I thought it was worth mentioning.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Do you want to take us to where do you want to go next?
So yeah, I can bring another good example. I guess this is kind of like the Mormons doing goodly segment, right?
That's right.
Another example of somebody sort of going above and beyond in their church setting is um, the Mike and Debly Osler from their Latter Day Saints in Arizona. um, they started basically a website that profiles 855 African American women who played a crucial role in resolving a massive postal crisis for the United States military during World War II. Basically,
Hmm.
they ensured the delivery of millions of pieces of mail to soldiers and loved ones in Europe who needed a morale boost during the war. And I can actually see how that's pretty important, like if these guys are out there and suddenly they can't communicate with the members of their members of their family and friends. And so these women were part of the 6 World War II battalion. And I don't know the full story, but basically, I think they were just like instrumental in getting these soldiers their mail. And what these members from the church in Arizona did was they used Family Search to gather newspaper clippings, photos, historical records, um, to basically create like a web page of each of these women in this battalion. And I think it's just a really cool resource for the descendants of these women, who maybe didn't. I'm sure that there were some people who didn't even know that they were didn't really know very much about these heroes. And I think they even had they had like a live streaming event where they sort of launched this website with 3 of the descendants of the battalion, and also that the battalion was like made into a movie called 6888 by I forget what his name is, Tyler Perry, and I think one of the stars from the movie was on the live streaming event. So it's just
There
an
you go.
example of a really cool example of somebody just normal everyday people in their ward. I don't know, maybe they volunteer a lot at the Family History Center. They had this great idea and they just made it happen, and they got a lot of attention for it, and they did a lot of good. And I don't know, maybe somebody in there, maybe there's other ways to do this, like other interesting sort of I could see this being replicated in some way.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, I love these stories where so much in our faith tradition, there's this feeling of like, well, if the church, if it needs to be done, the church would think of it and do it and fund it and it'd be great. When in reality, it's like, no, no, no. Like we're a Zion people. Like
Yeah.
we believe that God's calling us into a larger story where we are having an impact in the world. We make covenants, certain covenants in the temple that, we're not going to just wait around until some general conference announcement. And so the fact that this is happening, and I just love the, Family Search is at the foundation of all of this where, man, and I just finished reading Saints Volume 4,
Mm.
and it talks about the establishment of Family Search and just how the church really stayed ahead of that to the point that they are the source when it comes to family here, like they're the ones that holds the conference, right? Roots Tech every year. They're the ones that know the stuff. And and this is just an appendage to that, of being like, yeah, of course, our members did this. And there's just something about connecting to our ancestors and highlighting those, especially some of these stories. I mean, the World War II is so vast and so inspiring in so many ways, but it's hard to really encompass it into stories where you can retain it. So these type of stories get missed, but in a world with technology and the internet, man, let's highlight these. And
Yeah.
yeah, really cool. Really cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love stories of people doing grassroots stuff like this. At the end of the day, like, I don't know how many employees there are in the church, but they can only do so much. And
Right.
if we want to bring our our gospel and our light to the world, it's like the members of the church need to do it. And that's where the coolest, I think, a lot of the best stuff comes from. So I love to see stories like that.
Well, Jeff, do you know what to expect for FSY in 2025?
Not really, but I really wanted to talk about this
Okay.
because,
What angle do you want to go at
well,
here?
you put the article in the thing, and at
Yeah,
first I
yeah.
was like, okay, well, I don't know. Um,
I need
uh,
some lighthearted stuff after my
yeah,
terrible opinions about academia. I mean, all the emails I'm going to get about those things. Let's just talk about some fun FSY stuff. So that's why I put it.
yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add to this, but what stuck out to me about um, FSY in 2025, I just thought it was cool that they've got a Spanish FSY in
Mm,
Salt Lake City, and there's an American Sign Language FSY,
mm,
which I did not
love
know
it.
in Provo. Um, and yeah, I guess there's also some French supported sessions in Canada. But what's the theme for this year for FSY?
Let's see. I got distracted. The,
Um, I didn't put that in the
there
sheet,
it
but
is.
yeah,
Here it
it's like
is.
look unto Christ or
Yes,
something.
yes, yes. I think,
Yeah,
and that's obviously the youth theme in general.
right.
Um, yeah, and then obviously it just gets focused on even more FSY. So
Yeah.
FSY is.
So,
Go ahead.
well, okay. So I am a huge believer in EFY, which was before FSY,
Did you
and
go?
oh yeah, three
Oh yeah.
years.
Did
Yeah.
you did you get were you raised in Utah?
No, Virginia. I grew up in Virginia,
Okay.
and they had. I went to EFY 1 year, no, 2 years at Southern Virginia University, and then I went to a year in Seattle. Me and my core group of best friends, we went out to Seattle and did an EFY out there. And yeah, I almost kind of wonder if it's almost like a thing for millennials, because I feel like EFY really came into its own with my generation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I honestly, EFY changed my life. So, the first year that I went, it was really the first time that I had believed before, but it was really like the first time that I felt a strong testimony in the
Hmm.
gospel. And I
Yeah.
remember walking outside and literally promising to God, after we sang, the EFY hymn, the
Yeah.
EFY
Yeah.
song, whatever. I walked out there by myself. I looked up at the stars and I was like, I will never, I will never sin again. You know,
Of course. It's like
like,
Mosiah 4. You didn't even have a desire to sin or whatever it was.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I went home and I hung out with my friends. It was July 4th, or it was after July 4th. I hung out with some of my non-member friends, and they were just they were basically telling, how old? We were probably 14, right? And they were just telling me how they'd snuck beer from their dad's, July 4th party,
Uh-huh.
and they're cussing up a storm. And I had just a week feels like an eternity at
Uh-huh.
that age, especially when you're at EFY and you've had this life-changing experience. And I stood up and I was like, I said something I was like, why do you have to cuss so much? Why? I just said something
You
really
turned into the Brigham Young character with your
yeah,
Bible. The wrath of God will come upon you.
yeah. basically. And I like rode my bike home, and I knew that they were gonna follow me just to see what's going on. And I went out into the woods behind my house, and I literally like hid from them because I didn't know, how. And they came to my house. Hey, Mrs. Gosser, like, where's Jeff? Oh, he like went out on a walk or something. Anyway, from that point on, I basically it like changed my friend group and everything, and I found like really good close LDS friends who basically like got us through high school when everybody else was like drinking and smoking and doing teenager stuff. So that is my EFY story that I really wanted to share with you guys because yeah, I'm a believer and I'm glad that it's still going on.
So do you want to hear my EFY story? It's really short.
Yeah,
Um, I never went because I don't know if my parents intentionally made me understand it this way, but I thought EFY was like something for Latter-day Saint kids who lived outside of Utah that like came to BYU and did the thing. I think my parents just couldn't afford it. And so I never asked like, "Hey, can I go?" Or nobody, I grew up in West Valley, was not exactly an affluent area where, people were dropping that kind of cash to go spend a few days. But so yeah, I never went, but somehow I grasped a testimony along the way.
that actually makes a lot of sense though, because that was kind of part of the novelty of it, where
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of members around you growing up in the East Coast, and so we would go there, and it's like, oh my gosh, everybody here is LDS, and there's like tons of cute girls that I can talk
Yeah.
to, and um, all that type of stuff. So yeah, I could totally see that dynamic.
Yeah. Fun stuff. All right. Do we cover it all? Any
I think
last
so.
minute?
Yeah, I think
Um,
we're
or
here.
there's any, let's see, Sunday School President Paul V. Johnson announces BYU Pathway Resource Center in the Philippines.
Yep.
Eh, Awesome. Emotional first aid kits support Spain flood survivors. Like we were joking before, like here we are hyper focused on the LA fires, and yeah, people are dying in Spain. And we're like, okay, side note. So, of course, we're praying for them and we want the best for them.
Yeah.
But
There was
hopefully that doesn't
Yeah,
turn
I
into
think
a
there
larger
was like
story than it is.
and I didn't hear about this, but yeah, there was like a really major flood or something. I think it was like a year's worth of rain dropped on, was it Valencia or something back in October? And so it is worth noting that like European saints are coming together to help them. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
And then also, I'll just throw this out there: open house and dedication announced for the Nairobi, Kenya temple, um, and the
Oh yeah,
Belgium temple renderings were released. And I gotta say,
it is
that
cool.
looks super cool. And I
Really
kind
awesome.
of feel like it's like Manhattan 2.0, because like
Uh-huh.
the Manhattan temple is like you can't even see it. Like it's basically just like an office building with a statue of Moroni, and this is like super cool. Like it's sort of embedded in the sort of office buildings on the block,
Yeah.
but there's a very clear sort of indication of like I guess temple design into the buildings, and so
Yeah.
anyway, very cool.
Yeah. At first, when I saw it, I thought it was some weird AI rendering of like someone was playing around what a temple could look like. But I'm like, oh no, that's legit, and it's cool looking. And if the people in Texas saw the spire, they'd be like, that looks like maybe 20 feet from the top of the. Anyways, it doesn't have a prominent spire. It's more of a boxy thing. Anyway, so really
Right.
cool. I love seeing that stuff. It's one thing to hear them announce from General Conference, but then when renderings pop up, it's like, oh man, this is great. We just ride that wave. So
Especially when they're kind of unique, a little different than what we're used to, I think.
yeah, awesome. Well, in future episodes, we'll bring in a random date for Jeff to co-host with them, and we will witness
That could be
their
blind date.
courtship as they talk about the news in This Week in Mormon.
And then
So
people could tune in for even more awkwardness that I bring to this podcast. But hey, I don't know if that's
yeah,
what people like to see, which I think they
back
do.
in the day, Jeff and Al started as two single guys just chatting here, and look at them now. House is full of kids. No
We
time
turned
for
into like a
podcasting.
competition. We could turn it into like a reality show competition, you know?
What's the Provo one that does that? Have you watched that? There's like a Provo
No.
matchmakers or something. Anyways,
Is there one? I worked on one of those when I was in LA, actually.
your
Uh,
career's come a long way.
yeah. I'm going to start my own now on
Good,
Twim.
nice.
Twim
All right,
dates.
folks.
Do it.
Um, we encourage you to go to contact and This Week in Mormons. Continue listening. Go subscribe on YouTube. Become a patron because this may not surprise many people, but it's on a downward trajectory, and we could really use your support there. Shout out to Postum for keeping this ship above water, and so we can continue to talk. But we love all your feedback, even on my terrible opinions. I get they're not well thought through about academia and BYU and things, and you'll come at me. I can take it. So bring it. So go to contact at This Week in Mormons. Go to the comment section and get me. All right, I'm ready for it. So, did I miss anything, Jeff?
No, I'm
All
taking
right.
some postum to my camping trip this
Oh,
weekend. So
good. Yeah, I sent you a big box of Postum.
yeah,
So
thank you for that. I've been
he's
drinking it. And I'm thinking about applying some of Tiffany's
recipes. Yeah,
recipes. So yeah,
he's literally drinking the Kool-Aid, folks. All
yeah.
right, we'll see you guys.
Okay, see ya.